The Bones of Kahekili by Jack London. From over the lofty Kulau Mountains, vagrant wisps of the trade wind drifted, faintly swaying the great unwhipped banana leaves, rustling the palms, and fluttering and setting up a whispering among the lace-leaved algaroba trees. Only intermittently did the atmosphere so breathe, for breathing it was, the suspiring of the languid Hawaiian afternoon. In the intervals between the soft breathings, the air grew heavy and balmy, with the perfume of flowers and the exhalations of fat, living soil. Of humans about the low bungalow-like house there were many, but one only of them slept. The rest were on the tense tiptoes of silence. At the rear of the house a tiny babe piped up a thin, blatting wail that the quickly thrust breast could not appease. The mother, a slender hapahaole half-white, clad in a loose-flowing holoku of white muslin, hastened away swiftly among the banana and papaya trees to remove the babe's noise by distance. Other women, hapahaole and full native, watched her anxiously as she fled. At the front of the house, on the grass, squatted a score of Hawaiians. Well-muscled, broad-shouldered, they were all strapping men. Brown-skinned with luminous brown eyes and black, their features large and regular, they showed all the signs of being as good-natured, merry-hearted, and soft-tempered as the climate. To all of which a seeming contradiction was given by the ferociousness of their accoutrement. Into the tops of their rough leather leggings were thrust long knives, the handles projecting. On their heels were huge rolled Spanish spurs. They had the appearance of banditti, save for the incongruous wreaths of flowers and fragrant mail that encircled the crowns of their flopping cowboy hats. One of them, deliciously and roguishly handsome as a fawn, with the eyes of a fawn, wore a flaming double hibiscus bloom coquettishly tucked over his ear. Above them, casting a shelter of shade from the sun, grew a wide-spreading canopy of Ponciana regia, itself a flame of blossoms, out of each of which sprang pom-poms of feathery stamens. From far off, muffled by distance, came the faint stamping of their tethered horses. The eyes of all were intently fixed upon the solitary sleeper who lay on his back on a lahala mat 100 feet away under the monkey pod trees. Large as were the Hawaiian cowboys, the sleeper was larger. Also, as his snow-white hair and beard attested, he was much older. The thickness of his wrist and the greatness of his fingers made authentic the mighty frame of him hidden under loose dungaree pants and cotton shirt, buttonless, open from midriff to Adam's apple, exposing a chest matted with a thatch of hair as white as that of his head and face. The depth and breadth of that chest, its resilience, and its relaxed and plastic muscles tokened the knotty strength that still resided in him. Further, no bronze and beat of sun and wind availed to hide the testimony of his skin that he was all ha'al, a white man. On his back, his great white beard, thrust skyward, untrimmed of barbers, stiffened and subsided with every breath, while with the outblow of every exhalation, the white mustache erected perpendicularly like the quills of a porcupine and subsided with each intake. A young girl of 14, clad only in a single shift, or muumuu, herself a granddaughter of the sleeper, crouched beside him and with a feathered fly flapper brushed away the flies. In her face were depicted solicitude and nervousness and awe, as if she attended on a god. And truly Hardman Poole, the sleeping whiskery one, was to her, and to many and sundry, a god, a source of life, a source of food, a fount of wisdom, a giver of law, a smiling beneficence, a blackness of thunder and punishment. In short, a man-master whose record was 14 living and adult sons and daughters, 6 great-grandchildren, and more grandchildren than could he in his most lucid moments enumerate. 51 years before, he had landed from an open boat at Lapaho on the windward coast of Hawaii. The boat was the one surviving one of the whaler Black Prince of New Bedford. Himself, New Bedford born, 20 years of age, by virtue of his driving strength and ability, he had served as second mate on the lost whale ship. Coming to Honolulu and casting about for himself, he had first married Kalama Mamaiopili, next acted as pilot of Honolulu Harbor, after that started a saloon and boarding house, and finally, on the death of Kalama's father, engaged in cattle ranching on the broad pasture lands she had inherited. For over half a century he had lived with the Hawaiians, and it was conceded that he knew their language better than did most of them. By marrying Kalama, he had married not merely her land, but her own chief rank, and the fealty owed by the commoners to her, by virtue of her genealogy, was also accorded him. In addition, he possessed of himself all the natural attributes of chiefship: the gigantic stature, the fearlessness, the pride, and the high hot temper that could brook no impudence nor insult, that could be neither bullied nor awed by any utmost magnificence of power that walked on two legs, and that could compel service of lesser humans, not by any ignoble purchase by bargaining, but by an unspoken but expected condescending of largesse. He knew his Hawaiians from the outside and the in, knew them better than themselves, their Polynesian circumlocutions, faiths, customs, and mysteries. And at 71, after a morning in the saddle over the ranges that began at 4 o'clock, he lay under the monkey pods in his customary and sacred siesta that no retainer dared to break, nor would dare permit any equal of the great one to break. Only to the king was such a right accorded, and as the king had early learned, to break Hardman Poole's siesta was to gain a wake of very irritable and grumpy Hardman Poole, who would talk straight from the shoulder and say unpleasant but true things that no king would care to hear. The sun blazed down, the horses stamped remotely, the fading trade wind wisps sighed and rustled between longer intervals of quiescence, the perfume grew heavier. The woman brought back the babe, quiet again, to the rear of the house. The monkey pods folded their leaves and swooned to a siesta of their own in the soft air above the sleeper. The girl, breathless as ever from the enormous solemnity of her task, still brushed the flies away, and the score of cowboys still intently and silently watched. Hardman Poole awoke. The next out-breath, expected of the long rhythm, did not take place. Neither did the white long mustache rise up. Instead, the cheeks under the whiskers puffed, the eyelids lifted, exposing blue eyes, choleric and fully and immediately conscious. The right hand went out to the half-smoked pipe beside him, while the left hand reached the matches. "Get me my gin and milk," he ordered in Hawaiian of the little maid, who had been startled into a tremble by his awaking. He lighted the pipe, but gave no sign of awareness of the presence of his waiting retainers until the tumbler of gin and milk had been brought and drunk. "Well?" he demanded abruptly, and in the pause, while 20 faces wreathed in smiles and 20 pairs of dark eyes glowed luminously with well-wishing pleasure, he wiped the lingering drops of gin and milk from his hairy lips. "What are you hanging around for? What do you want? Come over here." 20 giants, most of them young, uprose and with a great clanking and jangling of spurs and spur chains strode over to him. They grouped before him in a semicircle, trying bashfully to wedge their shoulders, one behind another's, their faces a grin and apologetic, and at the same time expressing a casual and unconscious democraticness. In truth, to them, Hardman Poole was more than mere chief. He was elder brother or father or patriarch, and to all of them he was related in one way or another, according to Hawaiian custom, through his wife and through the many marriages of his children and grandchildren. His slightest frown might perturb them, his anger terrify them, his command compel them to certain death. Yet on the other hand, not one of them would have dreamed of addressing him otherwise than intimately by his first name, which name, Hardman, was transmuted by their tongues into Kanaka Ulea. At a nod from him, the semicircle seated itself on the manini grass, and with further deprecatory smiles waited his pleasure. "What do you want?" demanded, in Hawaiian, with a brusqueness and sternness they knew were put on. They smiled more broadly, and deliciously squirmed their broad shoulders and great torsos with the appeasingness of so many wriggling puppies. Hardman Poole singled out one of them. "Well, Iliopoi, what do you want?" $10, Kanaka Ulea. $10, Poole cried, in apparent shock at mention of so vast a sum. "Does it mean you are going to take a second wife? Remember the missionary teaching. One wife at a time, Iliopoi, one wife at a time. For he who entertains a plurality of wives will surely go to hell." Giggles and flashings of laughing eyes from all greeted the joke. "No, Kanaka Ulea," came the reply. "The devil knows I am hard put to get cow for one wife and her several relations." "Cow?" Poole repeated the Chinese-introduced word for food, which the Hawaiians had come to substitute for their own paina. "Didn't you boys get cow here this noon?" "Yes, Kanaka Ulea," volunteered an old, withered native who had just joined the group from the direction of the house. All of them had cow in the kitchen, and plenty of it, They ate like lost horses brought down from the lava. "And what do you want, Kumuhana?" Pool diverted to the old one, at the same time motioning to the little maid to flap flies from the other side of him. $12, said Kumuhana. "I want to buy a jackass and a second-hand saddle and bridle. I am growing too old for my legs to carry me in walking." "You wait," his Haole Lord commanded. "I will talk with you about the matter and about other things of importance when I am finished with the rest and they are gone." The withered old one nodded and proceeded to light his pipe. "The cow in the kitchen was good?" Iliapoi resumed, licking his lips. The poi was one finger, the pig fat, the salmon belly unstinking, the fish of great freshness and plenty, though the opihis, tiny, rock-clinging shellfish, had been salted and thereby made tough. Never should the opihis be salted. Often have I told you, Kanaka Ulea, that opihis should never be salted. I am full of good cow, my belly is heavy with it, yet is my heart not light of it because there is no cow in my own house. Where is my wife, who is the aunt of your fourth son's second wife? And where is my baby daughter, and my wife's old mother, and my wife's old mother's feeding child that is a cripple, and my wife's sister who lives likewise with us along with her 3 children, the father being dead of a wicked dropsy? Will $5 save all of you from funerals for a day or several?" Pool testily cut the tale short. "Yes, Kanaka Ulea, and as well it will buy my wife a new comb and some tobacco for myself." From a gold sack drawn from the hip pocket of his dungarees, Hardman Pool drew the gold piece and tossed it accurately into the waiting hand. To a bachelor who wanted $6 for new leggings, tobacco, and spurs, $3 were given. The same to another who needed a hat, and to a third who modestly asked for $2. 4 were given with a flowery worded compliment anent his prowess in roping a recent wild bull from the mountains. They knew, as a rule, that he cut their requisitions in half, therefore they doubled the size of their requisitions. And Hardman Pool knew they doubled, and smiled to himself. It was his way, and further, it was a very good way with his multitudinous relatives, and did not reduce his stature in their esteem. "And you, Ahu?" he demanded of one whose name meant poison wood. "And the price of a pair of dungarees," Ahuhu concluded his list of needs. "I have ridden much and hard after your cattle, Kanaka Ulea, and where my dungarees have pressed against the seat of the saddle, there is no seat to my dungarees. It is not well that it be said that a Kanaka Ulea cowboy, who is also a cousin of Kanaka Ulea's wife's half-sister, should be shamed to be seen out of the saddle, save that he walks backward from all that behold him. The price of a dozen pairs of dungarees be thine, Ahu." Hardman Pool beamed, tossing to him the necessary sum. "I am proud that my family shares my pride. Afterward, Ahu, out of the dozen dungarees you will give me 1, else shall I be compelled to walk backward, my own and only dungarees being in like manner well-worn and shameful." And in laughter of love at their Haole chief's final sally, all the sweet child-minded and physically gorgeous company of them departed to their waiting horses, save the old withered one, Kumuhana, who had been bidden to wait. For a full 5 minutes they sat in silence. Then Hardman Pool ordered the little maid to fetch a tumbler of gin and milk, which, when she brought it, he nodded her to hand to Kumuhana. The glass did not leave his lips until it was empty, whereon he gave a great audible outbreath of "Ah!" and smacked his lips. "Much awa have I drunk in my time," he said reflectively. "Yet is the awa but a common man's drink, while the Haole liquor is a drink for chiefs. The awa has not the liquor's hot willingness, its spur in the ribs of feeling, its biting alive of oneself that is very pleasant since it is pleasant to be alive." Hardman Pool smiled, nodded agreement, and old Kumuhana continued. "There is a warmingness to it. It warms the belly and the soul. It warms the heart. Even the soul and the heart grow cold when one is old." "You are old," Pool conceded, "almost as old as I." Kumuhana shook his head and murmured, "Were I no older than you, I would be as young as you." "I am 71, said Pool. "I do not know ages that way," was the reply. "What happened when you were born?" "Let me see," Pool calculated. "This is 1880. Subtract 71, and it leaves 9. I was born in 1809, which is the year Kalimakai died, which is the year the Scotchman, Archibald Campbell, lived in Honolulu." "Then am I truly older than you, Kanaka Ulea?" I remember the Scotchman well, for I was playing among the grass houses of Honolulu at the time, and already riding a surfboard in the Wahine, surf at Waikiki. I can take you now to the spot where was the Scotchman's grass house. The seaman's mission stands now on the very ground. Yet do I know when I was born. Often my grandmother and my mother told me of it. I was born when Madame Pale, the fire goddess or volcano goddess, became angry with the people of Paea because they sacrificed no fish to her from their fish pool, and she sent down a flow of lava from Hulalai and filled up their pond. Forever was the fish pond of Paea filled up. That was when I was born. That was in 1801, when James Boyd was building ships for Kamehameha at Hilo. Poole cast back through the calendar. Which makes you 79 or 8 years older than I. You are very old. Yes, Kanakaulia, muttered Kumuhana, pathetically attempting to swell his shrunken chest with pride. And you are very wise. Yes, Kanakaulia. And you know many of the secret things that are known only to old men. Yes, Kanakaulia. And then you know. Hardman Poole broke off, the more effectively to impress and hypnotize the other ancient with the set stare of his pale-washed blue eyes. They say the bones of Kahekili were taken from their hiding place and lie today in the royal mausoleum. I have heard it whispered that you alone of all living men truly know. I know, was the proud answer. I alone know. Well, do they lie there, yes or no? Kahekili was an ally, High Chief. It is from this straight line that your wife Kalama came. She is an ally. The old retainer paused and pursed his lean lips in meditation. I belong to her, as all my people before me belonged to her people before her. She only can command the great secrets of me. She is wise, too wise ever to command me to speak this secret. To you, O Kanakaulea, I do not answer yes, I do not answer no. This is a secret of the allies that even the allies do not know. Very good, Kumuhana, Hardman Poole commanded. Yet do you forget that I am an ally, and that what my good Kalama does not dare ask, I command to ask. I can send for her now and tell her to command your answer. But such would be a foolishness unless you prove yourself doubly foolish. Tell me the secret, and she will never know. A woman's lips must pour out whatever flows in through her ears, being so made. I am a man, and man is differently made. As you well know, my lips suck tight on secrets as a squid sucks to the salty rock. If you will not tell me alone, then will you tell Kalama and me together, and her lips will talk. Her lips will talk, so that the latest Malahini will shortly know what otherwise you and I alone will know. Long time Kumuhana sat on in silence, debating the argument and finding no way to evade the fact logic of it. Great is your Haole wisdom, he conceded at last. Yes or no? Hardman Poole drove home the point of his steel. Kumuhana looked about him first, then slowly let his eyes come to rest on the fly-flapping maid. Go, Poole commanded her, and come not back without you hear a clapping of my hands. Hardman Poole spoke no further, even after the flapper had disappeared into the house, yet his face adamantly looked. Yes or no? Again Kumuhana looked carefully about him and up into the monkey pod boughs as if to apprehend a lurking listener. His lips were very dry. With his tongue he moistened them repeatedly. Twice he essayed to speak, but was inarticulately husky. And finally, with bowed head, he whispered, so low and solemnly that Hardman Poole bent his own head to hear, No. Poole clapped his hands, and the little maid ran out of the house to him in tremulous, fluttery haste. Bring a milk and gin for old Kumuhana here, Poole commanded, and to Kumuhana, now tell me the whole story. Wait, was the answer. Wait till the little Wahine has come and gone. And when the maid was gone, and the gin and milk had traveled the way predestined of gin and milk when mixed together, Hardman Poole waited without further urge for the story. Kumuhana pressed his hand to his chest and coughed hollowly at intervals, bidding for encouragement, but in the end of himself spoke out. It was a terrible thing in the old days when a great ally died. Kahekili was a great ally. He might have been king had he lived, who can tell? I was a young man, not yet married. You know Kanakaulea when Kahekili died, and you can tell me how old I was. He died when Governor Boki ran the Blonde Hotel here in Honolulu. You have heard? I was still on windward Hawaii, Poole answered. But I have heard. Boki made a distillery, and leased Manoa lands to grow sugar for it, and Kahumanu, who was regent, canceled the lease, rooted out the cane, and planted potatoes. and Boki was angry and prepared to make war, and gathered his fighting men with a dozen whale-ship deserters and 5 brass 6-pounders out at Waikiki. That was the very time Kahekili died, Kumuhana broke in eagerly. You are very wise. You know many things of the old days better than we old Kanakas. It was 1829, Poole continued complacently. You were 28 years old and I was 20, just coming ashore in the open boat after the burning of the Black Prince. I was 28, Kumuhana resumed. It sounds right. I remember well Boki's brass guns at Waikiki. Kahekili died too at the time at Waikiki. The people to this day believe his bones were taken to the Halo Kawe mausoleum at Hononau in Kona, and long afterward were brought to the Royal Mausoleum here in Honolulu, Poole supplemented. Also, Kanaka Ulia, there are some who believe to this day that Queen Alice has them stored with the rest of her ancestral bones in the big jars in her taboo room. All are wrong. I know. The sacred bones of Kahekili are gone and forever gone. They rest nowhere. They have ceased to be. And many Kona winds have whitened the surf at Waikiki since the last man looked upon the last of Kahekili. I alone remain alive of those men. I am the last man, and I was not glad to be at the finish. For see, I was a young man, and my heart was white-hot lava for Malia, who was in Kahekili's household. So was Anapuni's heart white-hot for her, though the color of his heart was black, as you shall see. We were at a drinking that night, Anapuni and I, the night that Kahekili died. Anapuni and I were only commoners, as were all of us Kanakas and Wahines who were at the drinking with the common sailors and whaleship men from before the mast. We were drinking on the mats by the beach at Waikiki, close to the old heiau, that is not far from what is now the Wilders Beach place. It was one of the things never to be. You remember Chief Kanukalani? Himself, he strode up to the circle. His face was black with anger. He gripped Malia, not by the arm, but by the hair, and dragged her away behind him and was gone. Of that, even now, can I understand not the half. I, who was for slaying Annapuni because of her, raised neither hand nor voice of protest when Kanukalani dragged her away by the hair, nor did Annapuni. Of course, we were common men, and he was a chief. That I know. But why should two common men, mad with desire of woman stronger in them than desire of life, let any one chief, even the highest in the land, drag the woman away by the hair? Desiring her more than life, why should the two men fear to slay then and immediately the one chief? Here is something stronger than life, stronger than woman, but what is it, and why? I will answer you, said Hardman Poole. It is so because most men are fools, and therefore must be taken care of by the few men who are wise. Such is the secret of chiefship. In all the world are chiefs over men. In all the world that has been, have there ever been chiefs, who must say to the many fool men, do this, do not do that. Work and work as we tell you, or your bellies will remain empty and you will perish. Obey the laws we set you, or you will be beasts and without place in the world. You would not have been, save for the chiefs before you who ordered and regulated for your fathers. No seed of you will come after you, except that we order and regulate for you now. You must be peace-abiding and decent and blow your noses. You must be early to bed of nights and up early in the morning to work if you would heave beds to sleep in and not roost in trees like the silly fowls. This is the season for the yam planting, and you must plant now. We say now, today, and not picnicking and hooling today and yam planting tomorrow or some other day of the many careless days. You must not kill one another, and you must leave your neighbors' wives alone. All this is life for you, because you think but one day at a time, while we, your chiefs, think for you all days and for days ahead. Like a cloud on the mountaintop that comes down and wraps about you, and that you dimly see is a cloud, so is your wisdom to me, Kanaka Ulia. Kumuhana murmured, Yet is it sad that I should be born a common man and live all my days a common man. That is because you were of yourself common, Hardman Poole assured him. When a man is born common and is by nature uncommon, he rises up and overthrows the chiefs and makes himself chief over the chiefs. Why do you not run my ranch with its many thousands of cattle, and shift the pastures by the rainfall, and pick the bulls, and arrange the bargaining and the selling of the meat to the sailing ships and war vessels, and the people who live in the Honolulu houses, and fight with lawyers, and help make laws, and even tell the king what is wise for him to do, and what is dangerous? Why does not any man do this that I do? Any man of all the men who work for me, feed out of my hand and let me do their thinking for them, me, who work harder than any of them, who eats no more than any of them, and who can sleep on no more than one lauhalam at a time like any of them? I am out of the cloud, Kanaka Ulea, said Kumuhana, with a visible brightening of countenance. More clearly do I see. All my long years have the allies I was born under thought for me. Ever, when I was hungry, I came to them for food, as I come to your kitchen now. Many people eat in your kitchen, and the days of feasts when you slay fat steers for all of us are understandable. It is why I come to you this day, an old man whose labor of strength is not worth a shilling a week, and ask of you $12 to buy a jackass and a second-hand saddle and bridle. It is why twice 10 fool men of us, under these monkey pods half an hour ago, asked of you $1 or $2 or $4 or $5 or 10 or 12. We are the careless ones of the careless days who will not plant the yam in season if our alley does not compel us, who will not think one day for ourselves, and who, when we age to worthlessness, know that our alley will think cow into our bellies and a grass thatch over our heads. Hardman Poole bowed his appreciation and urged, But the Bones of Kahekili, the chief Kanukalani had just dragged away Malia by the hair of the head, and you and Annapuni sat on without protest in the circle of drinking. What was it Malia whispered in Annapuni's ear, bending over him, her hair hiding the face of him? That Kahekili was dead. That was what she whispered to Annapuni. That Kahekili was dead, just dead, and that the chiefs, ordering all within the house to remain within, were debating the disposal of the bones and meat of him before word of his death should get abroad. That the high priest Iopo was deciding them, and that she had overheard no less than Anapuni and me chosen as the sacrifices to go the way of Kahekili and his bones, and to care for him afterward, and forever in the shadowy other world. The Muipu, the human sacrifice, Poole commented. Yet it was 9 years since the coming of the missionaries. And it was the year before their coming that the idols were cast down and the taboos broken, Kumuhana added. But the chiefs still practiced the old ways, the custom of Hunakeli, and hid the bones of the Alice where no men should find them, and make fish hooks of their jaws or arrowheads of their long bones for the slaying of little mice in sport. Behold, O Kanaka Ulea! The old man thrust out his tongue, and to Poole's amazement he saw the surface of that sensitive organ from root to tip tattooed in intricate designs. That was done after the missionaries came, several years afterward, when Keopuolani died. Also, did I knock out 4 of my front teeth, and half circles did I burn over my body with blazing bark, and whoever ventured out of doors that night was slain by the chiefs. Nor could a light be shown in a house or a whisper of noise be made. Even dogs and hogs that made a noise were slain, nor all that night were the ship's bells of the haoles in the harbor allowed to strike. It was a terrible thing in those days when an Ali died. But the night that Kahekili died, we sat on in the drinking circle after Kunukalani dragged Malia away by the hair. Some of the haole sailors grumbled, but they were few in the land in those days, and the Kanakas many. And never was Malia seen of men again. Konokalani alone knew the manner of her slaying, and he never told. And in after years what common men like Anapuni and me should dare to question him? Now she had told Anapuni before she was dragged away, but Anapuni's heart was black. Me he did not tell. Worthy he was of the killing I had intended for him. There was a giant harpooner in the circle, whose singing was like the bellowing of bulls, and gazing on him in amazement while he roared some song of the sea. When next I looked across the circle to Anapuni, Anapuni was gone. He had fled to the high mountains where he could hide with the bird catchers a week of moons. This I learned afterward. I sat on, ashamed of my desire of woman that had not been so strong as my slave obedience to a chief. And I drowned my shame in large drinks of rum and whiskey till the world went round and round, inside my head and out, and the Southern Cross danced a hula in the sky, and the Koolau Mountains bowed their lofty summits to Waikiki, and the surf of Waikiki kissed them on their brows. And the giant harpooner was still roaring, his the last sounds in my ear, as I fell back on the lahala mat, and was to all things for the time as one dead. When I awoke was at the faint first beginning of dawn. I was being kicked by a hard naked heel in the ribs. What of the enormousness of the drink I had consumed, the feelings aroused in me by the heel were not pleasant. The Kanakas and Waheens of the drinking were gone. I alone remained among the sleeping sailormen, the giant harpooner snoring like a whale, his head upon my feet. More heel kicks, and I sat up and was sick, but the one who kicked was impatient and demanded to know where was Anapuni. And I did not know, and was kicked this time from both sides by 2 impatient men because I did not know, nor did I know that Kahekili was dead. Yet did I guess something serious was afoot, for the 2 men who kicked me were chiefs, and no common men crouched behind them to do their bidding. One was Imoku of Kanech, the other Humuhumu of Manoa. They commanded me to go with them, and they were not kind in their commanding, and as I uprose, the head of the giant harpooner was rolled off my feet, past the edge of the mat, into the sand. He grunted like a pig, his lips opened, and all of his tongue rolled out of his mouth into the sand, nor did he draw it back. For the first time I knew how long was a man's tongue. The sight of the sand on it made me sick for the second time. It is a terrible thing, the next day after a night of drinking. I was afire, dry afire, all the inside of me like a burnt cinder, like a lava, like the harpooner's tongue dry and gritty with sand. I bent for a half-drunk drinking coconut, but Imoku kicked it out of my shaking fingers, and Humuhumu smote me with the heel of his hand on my neck. They walked before me, side by side, their faces solemn and black, and I walked at their heels. My mouth stank of the drink, and my head was sick with the stale fumes of it, and I would have cut off my right hand for a drink of water. One drink, a mouthful even. And had I had it, I know it would have sizzled in my belly like water spilled on heated stones for the roasting. It is terrible, the next day after the drinking. All the lifetime of many men who died young has passed by me since the last I was able to do such mad drinking of youth, when youth knows not capacity and is undeterred. But as we went on, I began to know that Somali was dead. No Kanakas lay asleep in the sand, nor stole home from their lovemaking, and no canoes were abroad after the early fish most catchable then inside the reef at the change of the tide. When we came past the Hoya temple, to where the great Kamehameha used to haul out his brigs and schooners, I saw, under the canoe sheds, that the mat thatches of Kahekili's great double canoe had been taken off, and that even then, at low tide, many men were launching it down across the sand into the water. But all these men were chiefs, and though my eyes swam, and the inside of my head went around and around, and the inside of my body was a cinder athirst, I guessed that the Ali who was dead was Kahekili, for he was old, and most likely of the Alis to be dead. It was his death, as I have heard it, more than the intercession of Kekwanawa, that spoiled Governor Boki's rebellion, Hardman Poole observed. It was Kahekili's death that spoiled it, Kumahana confirmed. All commoners, when the word slipped out that night of his death, fled into the shelter of the grass houses, nor lighted fire nor pipes, nor breathed loudly, being therein and thereby taboo from use for sacrifice. And all Governor Boki's commoners of fighting men, as well as the Haole deserters from ships, so fled, so that the brass guns lay unserved and his handful of chiefs of themselves could do nothing. Aimoku and Humuhumu made me sit on the sand to the side from the launching of the great double canoe, and when it was afloat all the chiefs were athirst, not being used to such toil, and I was told to climb the palms beside the canoe sheds and throw down drink coconuts. They drank and were refreshed, but me they refused to let drink. Then they bore Kahekili from his house to the canoe in a howl coffin, oiled and varnished and new. It had been made by a ship's carpenter, who thought he was making a boat that must not leak. It was very tight, and over where the face of Kahekili lay was nothing but thin glass. The chiefs had not screwed on the outside plank to cover the glass. Maybe they did not know the manner of Howley coffins, but at any rate I was to be glad they did not know, as you shall see. "There is but one Mapu," said the priest Iopo, looking at me where I sat on the coffin in the bottom of the canoe. "Already the chiefs were paddling out through the reef." "The other has run into hiding," Aimoku answered. "This one was all we could get." And then I knew everything. I was to be sacrificed. Anapuni had been planned for the other sacrifice. That was what Malia had whispered to Anapuni at the drinking, and she had been dragged away before she could tell me, and in his blackness of heart he had not told me. "There should be two," said Iapo. "It is the law." Aimoku stopped paddling and looked back shoreward as if to return and get a second sacrifice. But several of the chiefs contended no, saying that all commoners were fled to the mountains or were lying taboo in their houses, and that it might take days before they could catch one. In the end, Iopo gave in, though he grumbled from time to time that the law required 2 mopus. We paddled on past Diamond Head and abreast of Cocoa Head till we were in the midway of the Molokai Channel. There was quite a sea running, though the trade wind was blowing light. The chiefs rested from their paddles, save for the steersmen who kept the canoes bow on to the wind and swell. And ere they proceeded further in the matter, they opened more coconuts and drank. "I do not mind so much being the Mopu," I said to Humuhumu, "but I should like to have a drink before I am slain." I got no drink, but I spoke true. I was too sick of the much whiskey and rum to be afraid to die. At least my mouth would stink no more, nor my head ache, nor the inside of me be as dry hot sand. Almost worst of all, I suffered at thought of the harpooner's tongue, as last I had seen it lying on the sand and covered with sand. O Kanaka Ulea, what animals young men are with the drink! Not until they have grown old, like you and me, do they control their wantonness of thirst and drink sparingly, like you and me. "Because we have to," Hardman Poole rejoined. "Old stomachs are worn thin and tender, and we drink sparingly because we dare not drink more. We are wise, but the wisdom is bitter." The priest Iopo sang a long mele about Kahekili's mother and his mother's mother, and all their mothers all the way back to the beginning of time, Kumahana resumed. And it seemed I must die of my sand-hot dryness ere he was done. And he called upon all the gods of the underworld, the middle world and the overworld, to care for and cherish the dead alley about to be consigned to them, and to carry out the curses. They were terrible curses. He laid upon all living men and men to live after who might tamper with the bones of Kahekili to use them in sport of vermin slaying. Do you know, Kanaka Ulea, the priest talked a language largely different, and I know it was the priest language, the old language. Maui, he did not name Maui, but Maui Tiki Tiki and Maui Po Tiki. And Hina, the goddess mother of Maui, he named Ina. And Maui's godfather he named sometimes Akalana and sometimes Kanaloa. Strange how one about to die and very thirsty should remember such things. And I remember the priest named Hawaii as Vai and Lanai as Ngangai. Those were the Maori names, Hardman Poole explained, and the Samoan and Tongan names that the priests brought with them in their first voyages from the south in the long ago when they found Hawaii and settled to dwell upon it. Great is your wisdom, O Kanaka Ulea, the old man accorded solemnly. Ku, our supporter of the heavens, the priest named Tu, and also Ru, and La, our god of the sun, he named Ra. And Ra was a sun god in Egypt in the long ago, Poole interrupted with a sparkle of interest. Truly, you Polynesians have traveled far in time and space since first you began. A far cry it is from old Egypt when Atlantis was still afloat to young Hawaii in the North Pacific. But proceed, Kumuhana. Do you remember anything also of what the priest Iapo sang? At the very end, came the confirming nod, though I was near dead myself, and nearer to die under the priest's knife, he sang what I have remembered every word of. Listen, it was thus. And in quavering falsetto, with the customary broken notes, the old man sang. A Maori death chant unmistakable, Poole exclaimed, sung by an Hawaiian with a tattooed tongue. Repeat it once again, and I shall say it to you in English. And when it had been repeated, he spoke it slowly in English. But death is nothing new. Death is and has been ever since old Maui died. Then Patatai laughed loud and woke the goblin god who severed him in two and shut him in, so dusk of eve came on. And at the last, Kumuhana resumed, I was not slain. Iopo, the killing knife in hand and ready to lift for the blow, did not lift. And I, how did I feel and think? Often, Kanaka Ulea, have I since laughed at the memory of it. I felt very thirsty. I did not want to die. I wanted a drink of water. I knew I was going to die, and I kept remembering the 1,000 waterfalls falling to waste down the palaces of the windward Kulau Mountains. I did not think of Anapuni. I was too thirsty. I did not think of Malia. I was too thirsty. But continually inside my head, I saw the tongue of the harpooner, covered dry with sand as I had last seen it, lying in the sand. My tongue was like that too, and in the bottom of the canoe rolled about many drinking nuts. Yet I did not attempt to drink, for these were chiefs and I was a common man. No, said Iapo, commanding the chiefs to throw overboard the coffin. There are not two mupus, therefore there shall be none. Slay the one, the chiefs cried. But Iapo shook his head and said, We cannot send Kahekili on his way with only the tops of the taro. Half a fish is better than none, Aimoku said the old saying. Not at the burying of an alley, was the priest's quick reply. It is the law. We cannot be niggered with Kahekili and cut his allotment of sacrifice in half. So for the moment, while the coffin went overside, I was not slain, and it was strange that I was glad immediately that I was to live, and I began to remember Malia and to begin to plot a vengeance on Anapuni. And with the blood of life thus freshening in me, my thirst multiplied on itself tenfold, and my tongue and mouth and throat seemed as sanded as the tongue of the harpooner. The coffin being overboard, I was sitting in the bottom of the canoe. A coconut rolled between my legs, and I closed them on it. But as I picked it up in my hand, Aimoku smote my hand with the paddle edge. Behold! He held up the hand, showing 2 fingers crooked from never having been set. I had no time to vex over my pain, for worse things were upon me. All the chiefs were crying out in horror. The coffin, head end up, had not sunk. It bobbed up and down in the sea astern of us. And the canoe, without way on it, bow on to sea and wind, was drifted down by sea and wind upon the coffin. and the glass of it was to us, so that we could see the face and head of Kahekili through the glass. And he grinned at us through the glass and seemed alive already in the other world and angry with us, and with otherworld power, about to wreak his anger upon us. Up and down he bobbed, and the canoe drifted closer upon him. "Kill him! Bleed him! Thrust to the heart of him!" These things the chiefs were crying out to Iapo in their fear. "Over with the taro tops! Let the alley have the half of a fish!" Iapo, priest though he was likewise afraid, and his reason weakened before the sight of Kahekili in his high-old coffin that would not sink. He seized me by the hair, drew me to my feet, and lifted the knife to plunge to my heart, and there was no resistance in me. I knew again only that I was very thirsty, and before my swimming eyes, in mid-air and close up, dangled the sanded tongue of the harpooner. But before the knife could fall and drive in, the thing happened that saved me. Akai, half-brother to Governor Boki, as you will remember, was steersman of the canoe, and therefore in the stern, was nearest to the coffin and its dead that would not sink. He was wild with fear, and he thrust out with the point of his paddle to fend off the coffined alley that seemed bent to come on board. The point of the paddle struck the glass broke, and the coffin immediately sank. Hardman Poole broke in, the air that floated it escaping through the broken glass. The coffin immediately sank, being builded by the ship's carpenter like a boat, Kumahana confirmed. And I, who was a moipu, became a man once more. And I lived, though I died 1,000 deaths from thirst before we gained back to the beach at Waikiki. And so, O Kanaka Olea, the bones of Kahekili do not lie in the royal mausoleum. They are at the bottom of Molokai Channel. If not, long since they have become floating dust of slime, or builded into the bodies of the coral creatures dead and gone, are builded into the coral reef itself. Of men, I am the one living who saw the bones of Kahekili sink into the Molokai Channel. In the pause that followed, wherein Hardman Poole was deep sunk in meditation, Kumuhana licked his dry lips many times. At the last he broke silence. The $12 Kanaka Ulea for the jackass and the second-hand saddle and bridle? "The $12 would be thine," Poole responded, passing to the Ancient One $6.50. "Save that I have in my stable junk the very bridle and saddle for you, which I shall give you. These $6.50 will buy you the perfectly suitable jackass of the paycake." At Kokako, who told me only yesterday that such was the price. They sat on, Poole meditating, conning over and over to himself the Maori death chant he had heard, and especially the line, "So dusk of eve came on," finding in it an intense satisfaction of beauty. Kumahana licking his lips and tokening that he waited for something more. At last he broke silence. "I have talked long, O Kanaka Ulea. There is not the enduring moistness in my mouth that was when I was young. It seems that afresh upon me is the thirst that was mine when tormented by the visioned tongue of the harpooner. The gin and milk is very good, O Kanaka Ulea, for a tongue that is like the harpooner's." A shadow of a smile flickered across Poole's face. He clapped his hands, and the little maid came running. "Bring 1 glass of gin and milk for old Kumahana," commanded Hardman Poole. Waikiki, Honolulu, June 20th,